Hi, everyone. This is Diane with Sacred Light Integrations. Hopefully, you are having a fantastic day. I wanted to hop on and do a quick video regarding the mirror. I've talked about in social media and my articles and different videos, and you may have heard other practitioners talked about this mirror. And I wanted to share with you on how I've utilized it. And maybe it'll help you on your journey to figure out what's in your energy body and learn how to work with it a little bit. So how I imagine this in my head is I imagine light coming down from the universe, that light hitting my cells and then reflecting out to the world around me, what's inside of me or in my energy body. So when people trigger my emotions and not in a good way, I know that's something I need to dive into, especially if it's a pattern throughout my life, in different areas of my life. So I try to identify it very finely, figure out what the emotion specifically is. And once you can do that, if you can really get down and identify it, sometimes that really helps me. Because at first I would always just, you're angry, upset, mad, whatever. But when you can sit down and fine tune what emotion it is, that's when I could really start to dive in and look within to see what it was I didn't like about myself. And then once I was able to figure out what it was that I didn't like about myself, I could recognize it, understand maybe the story behind it, do a little healing work, a little ho'oponopono, maybe some crystal work, maybe it's just some forgiveness toward myself. And sometimes it's just a matter of understanding where it came from is such a powerful tool in and of itself. And what was so interesting for me so often in my life is the person that was showing me that the strongest, after I learned that lesson, they would leave. In the corporate world, there was many people, of course, we have an opportunity to work with many people. And there would be people that I would learn lessons from. And within a short amount of time, they got transferred or they quit or they weren't no longer assigned to me on my team. So it was really wonderful for the universe to do that for me, to show like the person showing it to me the strongest. When that person left, I felt that I had worked through that trigger, that emotion, at least that layer of it, because we all know that we're multiple layers of energy. So I had a good trigger to know like when that was done. So I wanted to share a few examples though, because hopefully my sharing with you can help you figure out how to work with this a little bit, maybe for yourself. So my first example that I had is I had a relative that would show up and nitpick little tiny things about cleaning my house. Nothing major. It wasn't like it was filthy. I keep a very pretty clean house, especially after learning about how all of the energy around us impacts us. So I keep things clean and neat and allow the air to flow through it. I don't have many things sitting out. It's very intentional on what is sitting out. So when little things were pointed out to me, it really bothered me. So the first thing I did was I started thinking like, okay, if that's a reflection outside of me, am I judgmental when I go to the people's houses? And I'm like, no, because other people's houses, they can do what they want and it doesn't bother me a bit. I'm just glad to be invited and be included in whatever event it is. The state of their home doesn't bother me at all. So that wasn't it. And then I was thinking like, did I ever say anything? And I'm like, that didn't resonate with me. And so I went in and I dove into the emotion, which I fine-tuned, and it was for me, it was very angry about, this is just really making me angry when this is happening. So I looked at various scenarios and nothing was really resonating. So I meditated on it. I really got in the energy. After a visit with this person, they left and I just sat down and I really got in the energy of it and I started meditating. And it came to me that a memory I'd completely forgotten about, but when I was in the hospital, one of my hospital stays was over 18 days. And my mother-in-law and my mom had gone to my house to tidy up after my ex-husband. Whole nother story. We won't go down that road. But I was angry at the fact that I couldn't be home to clean it. And then I was angry at him for not being able for a couple of weeks to keep the house clean. You're one person. So I was very angry about that. And when it came to my reality, I understood it. I'm like, yeah, that it did. It made me very angry. And I kept saying that did. It made me very angry. And so, first of all, just understanding where that trigger came from was a huge thing because it was a situation I had forgotten about. Um, I mean, I don't even know if it had come to, usually these things come to mind a little bit, and it may have over time, but um, it was very traumatic, obviously. So I worked with that, and a couple weeks later, the relative shows up. We had a very nice visit, and I was prepared, and no word was said. Nothing was said about the state of my home. Um, no little comments about this, that, or the other thing. So hopefully that one is healed. Like I said, just knowing was a huge part of that. So that's one example of identifying it, understanding it, where it came from, and then, working through that to forgive all of everyone involved, including myself, for not recognize it. So that was pretty big. So, and of course, as I said, I have plenty from from living, working in the corporate world, as many of us do, because we all have people that poke our emotional buttons. So the next one is myself. I've always been very stable in my job. I'm an educated person. I have 5 degrees and I have my CPA and very good work ethic, but I have always had this concern of being fired. I've always made these little comments of like, and for so many years, it was very subconscious when I would just make it out of, like I said, a very subconscious reaction to many things that would happen when I would get called in, or when somebody would, we were discussing that I'd made a mistake, or, whatever it was. But I started to realize it was actually my boss actually had it in one of my reviews to not make that comment. She says, I don't want your coworkers to think they're going to get fired for making simple mistakes. And so I was very aware of it because I, try to follow that and not make comments like that. But I still found myself slipping. And so I'm like, okay, this is obviously something I need to dive into, because where's this coming from? It's never been validated, by any of my profession, the jobs that I've had. So I started thinking about it, getting the vibration. I'm like, I really do have a fear of being fired. I really have a fear of being fired. And I'm like I said, I have no idea where this came from, because I feel like I'm a good employee, and I very pat myself on the back. I'm very good at my job, and I'm very just aware of everything when I'm at my job. I'm responsible, and I feel like I do a good job. So I could not get into this, got to figure out. So I ended up doing in a past life regression, it came up that, and at first I didn't put the connections together, because this came up as I was working on it in a past life regression. And I had actually died because I couldn't support myself. And at the time I was just a little kid, but my family had died, and I also perished because I couldn't support myself. And a few weeks later, I put the connection together. And that fear of being fired was for fear of, not being able to support myself. So that one took a little bit of work, of course, but diving into it and knowing it was there, I was able to clear that up. And the fear is gone now. And I feel much more comfortable when, things happen at work, then I'm not going to be the first one to go. So that was that side of it. Another situation from my corporate world, I had a coworker, and her and I would consider her, a work friend. We never did things outside of work socially. Well, she did actually stop by my house a few times, because she was getting, she would pick up some oil blends that I would gift them. But after COVID, she changed completely. And now I moved during COVID. And then when we went to go back to the office, she completely changed. And she started showing me some things that I obviously needed to see about myself. And there was a laundry list. But because we had been closer before, I was very, you're patient and you figure out what an emotion is and then you move on. And I kept thinking I was done. And then there was another one that I was able to identify. And I won't go through that long laundry list. But even after that long laundry list of emotions that I uncovered with her help, gratefully, she still would trigger that emotional button. And it was very frustrating because I thought I had learned so much and worked through so much of everything that I had, identified, that the mirror was showing me through her. And one day we were in the office and she made a comment and I was just, defeated. And I said, "What is it?" And I literally heard my guide say, "She's you." She was 20 years younger than me. And her actions were who I was 20 years ago, a person I very much do not care for anymore. I was in a very different place with my health, with my life, and my attitude. My outlook, my perception was completely different 20 years ago than what it is now. And as soon as the guide said that, everything made sense. Well, I talk about how once I learned a lesson, 7 days later, after I asked that question, I got my answer on why she was still poking my buttons, and I realized what it was. 7 days later, they fired her and she was gone. And it was as if the universe was putting a stamp of saying, "Mark that one off your list. You recognize the person you were 20 years ago is the one you don't care for." So I did a little work around that, but knowing that she left so quickly, I felt for that one, it was just understanding, we change, we all change. So as you're uncovering your layers, leave that door open as well, that maybe there's something about a person or a version of you from before that's causing the problems. So that one was pretty fun. One more from the corporate world, and we've talked about our emotions, and the first one was angry, that I found with the messy house, and the fear from the coworker, or fear from the losing my job. And the coworker was the frustration. I may not have mentioned that, but that emotion was basically just frustration. And so the mirror shows us hiccups, but the mirror can also show us the positive things we may not recognize about ourselves. So one more story from my corporate world. One day my boss called me in, and no, I didn't freak out, but I called in and she had a piece of paper on her desk and she told me to read it. And it was an email from one of the higher level directors or officers in the company to the CFO, praising me for my work. Literally listing things about me. Like she anticipates the needs and she asks herself how she can be helpful, and she makes things simple for all of us, and she's courteous, she owns her mistakes. It's just great attitude. She seeks out how to solve the problems for us to help us. And he went on about, showing some positive sides of me. And I was speechless. I'd been in the corporate world, obviously, for a little time by the gray hairs. But I'd never seen anything to that degree of praising and complimenting. So after I got over the shock, it was so interesting because this man, he's a very strict, and maybe that's why I always resonated with him, because my father was very strict. And he did kind of remind me of my father, but he liked the way he knew what he wanted done, and he wanted it done correctly. So, but he was kind of strict side. And I know that some people had some bumps with him, but I had never had that. But he had praised me up and down, and I was just like, wow. So after I was in shock, after I got over the shock, I'm like, wait a second. When I have the negative, or the emotions that I need to heal, what is it that I need to recognize about myself? Because obviously this person had come out and was showing me something that I needed to recognize in myself that I was missing. And when I sat through and I just read the email a couple times, and the one word, because I try to summarize it in one word so we can identify it and pinpoint things, the one word I came up with was valued. And it was very powerful for me because many years when I was unhealthy, I didn't feel like I gave any value to society. So I was so sick, and I didn't feel, I mean, I did what I could every day. I did my job, and um, you know, I hid it for so long, but I think I never valued myself for all I have done and work that I do. So um, we have to find the good stuff too. But I do want to share one more little story. Speaking of finding the good stuff in ourselves, we oftentimes don't see it, obviously, in this case. And I'm sure you're the same way. We all have great qualities that we don't see in ourselves. I've been to a workshop with probably 20 people that I'd never met before. And we had like an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, that we were working on little stuff, and we worked in groups, and then we worked as little groups and the whole group. And so we got to know everybody. So then we counted off or whatever, but we had to write down maybe 3 to 5 good things about the people that we had met. Now, we'd never met these people, so it's basically your 3 to 5 things of positive traits about that person. And then we went around the room and we would read the positive trait that we saw in the person that, we would go up, count off in order. And it was shocking for all of us, because we chatted afterwards, like what other people saw as their first impression of us. And they were all very positive and introspective. And we gave each other those pieces of paper so we could remember what other people thought of us. We often, in our mind, we beat ourselves up about a lot of things. But remember, there's a lot of good in all of us. It's just a matter of uncovering that and owning it and valuing ourselves. So, well, I hope this has been beneficial to you, and some of my fun stories can help you on your journey as you begin to dive into pinpointing your emotional triggers and discovering them and healing them. I still have my service that I still do, is working with emotional barriers and triggers and stuff, and working through those with people. So if you get stuck or need a little encouragement or a nudge, don't hesitate to reach out. But until next time, have a wonderful day. Namaste.